Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Equals. This is your co host, Nadia.
And this is your co-host Max. This is a really exciting episode because we're focusing on climate and inequality, and we're gonna hear first of all from Nafkote, who's been on the podcast before. She's our amazing climate lead at Oxfam, and she's in Egypt at the climate COP as we speak. We're going to hear a bit about the report. Then we're going to hear from a few other people on this issue of climate and inequality. But let's go to you, Naf. So, how's it going over there in Egypt?
Right now, it's a bit disappointing because it feels like equity and justice is missing from all the negotiations, from the conference, from all the discussions. So when it comes to mitigation, reducing emissions, or when we're talking about loss and damage issues, an issue that is critical, so important for climate vulnerable countries, communities at the front line of the crisis, there's no answer coming out from these negotiations.
Naf, can I probe you a bit on that? Because I mean, we hear about this equity and about rich countries, not stepping up, not playing their part, and then at the same time, Oxfam has just put out this report, right, on the role of rich individuals, especially. Can you talk to us a little bit about what what is Oxfam saying on that? What do you want? What is a key message coming out of the work that Oxfam is doing right now when it comes to rich people, billionaires, and their responsibility?
So Oxfam's report actually is really, really relevant in these spaces because what's missing, the discussion that's missing in this space is about who is responsible. It's not only rich countries, yeah, it's also the richest people and corporates. So our latest report shows that it's not only their lifestyle, but also their investment that's causing, the climate crisis. So investment from the richest uh, is causing a million times more emission compared to someone in the bottom 90% of humanity. So in these spaces, when we're talking about responsibility for the climate crisis, we should also be talking about the richest people and what they can do. So for instance, we can also link this to the issue of loss and damage. There's a lot of discussion on the need for loss and damage funding, and rich countries, for instance, are resisting that. The finance needed for loss and damage is a lot, but one way we can address this issue, not Oxfam is pushing on this, a lot of civil society are also backing us. Developing countries negotiators are also catching on this. They're asking for for the richest to be taxed, or their wealth to be taxed, and that can finance loss and damage funding.
Oh, that's great. Thanks, Steph. And we're going to hear in the rest of the program from an activist in the Netherlands who was kind of chaining himself to private planes at the airport in Amsterdam just recently, and from Harjeet Singh as well, who's from the Climate Action Network. Is going to talk a bit more about the greenwashing, the influence of business. But for now, Naf, that was great. Thank you for the summary, and thank you for taking the time out of your busy lobbying agenda. We wish you the best of luck in these last few crucial days. Keep fighting for equity and justice at the COP in Egypt.
Thanks so much.
Gosh, well, it was great hearing from Naf. That what shocked me was the facts that were coming out of it are actually really shocking. Not just the amount of emissions by these billionaires, but also the amount of tax dollars that we could be generating if we were to tax this billionaire wealth.
Yeah, I mean, it was quite an interesting bit of research, because there's been if you think about it, two streams. There's been a lot of stuff in the press about the kind of lifestyle emissions of the super rich, their yachts, their private jets, and rightly so, because their lifestyle emissions are enormous. And then there's a lot of kind of parallel work, if you like, climate activists looking at the big investors, pension funds, universities, trying to get them to divest from fossil fuels. And that's been going on for some years now with some successes. But what we tried to do with this research was look at billionaires, not just as consumers of carbon, but as investors. We looked at the companies where they have massive investments and the emissions of those companies. And we found that billionaires are twice as likely to be invested in polluting industries than average, and that on average, the average billionaire in our sample emits 1 million times more carbon than someone in the bottom 90%. So it really is off the charts. These guys are immensely, and they are mostly guys, mostly white guys, have immense power over our global economy and are at the moment putting their money into fossil fuels and burning the planet. So yeah, it's good. It was good thing to be a part of.
Well, and I was just also thinking, in the space that I'm operating in here in DC, there's all this conversation about, how do you get from the billions to the trillions? And I'm like, the answer is right here. We have over $1 trillion available if you tax this billionaire wealth. How much? It's 1.4, isn't it? That
1.4
was
trillion,
estimated.
and plenty of money, and that's from a reasonably moderate wealth tax on people with wealth of 5 million, 50 million, or over a billion, and that would give you, a conservative estimate, $1.4 trillion in additional tax revenue each year, and that would make a
Amazing.
huge difference. Imagine what that could do in terms of helping poor countries cope with the impacts of climate change. Paying the reparations that we owe them for the damage we've done to the world.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to hear another perspective from Sharm el Sheikh in Egypt. There's Harjeet Singh from Climate Action Network is here ready to speak with us as well.
Yeah, that's great. Let's hear from him too. Harjeet, do you want to just introduce yourself?
I'm Harjeet Singh, Head of Global Political Strategy at Climate Action Network and Global Engagement Director at the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty Initiative. I'm based in New Delhi, India.
And you're speaking to us from the COP.
I am in Sharm el Sheikh right now. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thanks for spending the time and getting on. I wanted to ask you, get your perspective. You've been active on these issues for many years, doing amazing work. How you see this kind of intersection, if you like, between economic inequality and the fight for climate justice. What does it mean to you?
Well, since I started working on the climate change, we always looked at this issue from the perspective of development deficit, inequality, and the connections between economic inequality and climate injustice. In fact, it's the global inequality between countries and also between elites and average persons that has caused the climate crisis in the first place. And now, when you look at health crisis intensifying and even the global energy crisis, the link between economic inequality and all these crises is absolutely crystal clear.
Yeah, and when you see the emissions of the richest, the power of the richest, can you tell me a bit about? I mean, there's been quite a lot of work looking at the role of rich people and corporates at the COP itself. I mean, do you feel they're kind of? I mean, you've been going to the COP for many years. Do you think it's got worse? Do you see the kind of influence of industry more, and or is that just being called out more?
Honestly, it is getting worse, and especially when we saw at Glasgow, the fossil fuel um, industry had the biggest delegation. And here, there are already stories out that there are more than 600 fossil fuel lobbyists floating around and using this COP as a space to sell fossil fuels and turning this very important climate conference into an expo so that they can get more contracts for fossil fuel investments. And we have also seen how elites influence these negotiations to their own benefit so that they can continue with the same economic model that has caused all these crises in the first place.
And give me an example of, like, I mean, you seeing the kind of influence of billionaires. What's the kind of things they're pushing for, and what should we worry about?
We should be worried about because some of these funds created by these billionaires, I would not call them um, more than greenwashing. This is just to clean their image because the main problem remains their business model and the way they have constructed their businesses, which are high emitting and causing more inequality. They're not respecting workers' rights, they're not respecting environmental standards, but they would like to create these funds that can help them do more greenwashing and improve their image, their business's image, and that is extremely harmful. Just look at this one of the main sponsors of this COP27 is Coca-Cola. When we know that it is the biggest consumer of plastics, another product of fossil fuels.
But a lot of people out there probably don't realise how something as perverse as a global conference to tackle climate change has more people from the fossil fuel industry than anyone else and is sponsored by Coca Cola. I mean, it feels like something out of a novel. But give us some hope as well, Harjeet, because at the same time this is happening, we've seen this massive groundswell of anger worldwide on the issue of reparations, of loss and damage. That feels to be coming through a lot this time in Egypt. Can you say a bit more about that and how you're feeling about it?
Sure, Max, and you are absolutely right. There is some hope, but the hope is not coming from so called world leaders. Hope is coming from people who have been raising their voice on how this global inequality has actually affected people. When we talk about climate change and impacts, it's increasing inequality because people who have done least to cause the problem are facing these impacts. So they have been calling for a loss and damage finance facility or a fund that helps them recover from these climate impacts. And it's a matter of justice. It's about reparations, compensation, obligations. Of course, we know this language may not land in these climate negotiations when the final outcome is there. But what we essentially need is a fund that helps them rebuild their lives and recover from these impacts. And we saw traction on the day one of COP27 conference where this agenda on what we call loss and damage finance is firmly there under finance. And this has been a major demand for the last several years. And it's the first time we got it. And there's huge pressure that we have put on rich countries to respond to the demands. And another good thing is we have seen unprecedented unity uh, within the group of developing countries, what we call as G77, and they're all together demanding. And that's how we got some traction at COP26. And here also they seem to be united so far.
Which is amazing, and we've certainly seen that work in other negotiations like trade and things in the past, haven't we? What would you say is the difference to your mind between climate finance and loss and damage? Could you just give a sense for what the kind of loss and damage frame brings to the whole debate?
Sure. So far, the climate finance has been limited to mitigation and adaptation. So, mitigation, as we all know, it's about reducing greenhouse gas emissions, protecting forest, and adaptation is helping people prepare well before disasters. So, retrofitting their homes or building dikes, or adapting their agriculture to be more resilient. Whereas loss and damage finance is about helping people when they are already affected, when they lose their homes, their crops, their income, uh, infrastructure loss. That's when the whole issue of loss and damage finance becomes applicable. However, when we demand loss and damage finance, it has to be new and additional to climate finance for mitigation and adaptation. And I must tell you, Max, the amount is going to run into hundreds of billions of dollars, which makes rich countries nervous. But the reality is that we are facing losses and damages, these climate impacts, because of 30 years of inaction.
No, exactly. And then one of the things we've been calling for this week is, or at least drawing attention to the scale of revenue that could be raised from taxing rich people and taxing billionaires. We need to get that money and liberate it, I think.
Exactly, and I would like to particularly mention fossil fuel industry and the windfall profits that they have made and how those profits must be taxed. And even UN Secretary General did talk about taxing these companies so that people who are suffering from the climate crisis, so on loss and damage finance as we are demanding, but also people who are facing the food and energy crisis, including in the global north, they need to be helped. A carbon brief did an analysis that 10% of tax on oil and gas profits could have raised $49 billion for loss and damage in 2022 alone. So imagine the amount of money they have been making. So money is there, and we also know where it needs to go. What is missing is the political will and how those vested interests between governments and corporations that needs to be exposed so that we can start seeing redistribution of these this money that needs to go to vulnerable people who have not caused the problem.
Thank you, Harjeet. That was amazing, and good luck for the rest of the week at the COP. We've got to keep fighting.
Thank you so much, Max. It was great to join you in this interesting conversation.
Oh, that was a good interview you did with Harjeet there, Max. And I mean, one of the things that struck me is just the silver lining of this all. There's a lot of disappointment we're hearing coming out of COP27, but the silver lining and the positive thing that keeps happening is this movement building against climate change, and really especially the young activists that we've heard about from these interviews, but also that we've been reading about in the news. And I'm excited that we get a chance to hear from one of them, this Teun Ott, a young activist from the Extinction Rebellion in Netherlands, and hear about the kind of thing that he was doing in the Netherlands, and where he actually got arrested.
This young guy, he's amazing, and what they did occupying the airport in the Netherlands. Well, you're going to hear about it in the interview. It's really exciting. So let's listen to that. Teun, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, of course. I'm very thrilled to be here. I'm Teun. I'm a climate activist, and I'm a history teacher in training in Amsterdam. Today I'm 19 years old, but tomorrow I'll turn 20, which is also very exciting. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very exciting. Yeah, I'm nearly 50, so I'm very jealous as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you were involved in the amazing protest that we all saw in the newspapers at Schipol Airport just the other day. Could you tell us a bit about them? What was the idea behind that? What were you trying to show the world?
Well, first of all, what I think we wanted to show the world is that that especially by blocking private jets, is that the aviation industry, especially the part that focuses on the super rich, the millionaires, the billionaires, that it's totally unsustainable, it's totally unfair, and it basically cannot continue like this.
So tell us about the process itself. I think there's about 200 people. And I mean, have you done things like this before? Is it quite scary? Is you not worried that you're going to get arrested or shot or something?
Well, shot was a bit. It did cross my mind, but it wasn't a big concern. But I have done stuff like this before, especially with the Extinction Rebellion. I think the first time when I got arrested, I was just 18. After a while, you get kind of used to it.
But I'm so impressed. I'm nearly 50 and I've never been arrested, and I'm really impressed. So talk me about it. So did you get there really early? So you had it all planned before? You knew where the private jets were, or was it kind of a bit spontaneous? How does it work?
Well, the planning had been going on for quite a while. I do know a couple of the organizers, and it was like a lot of work and a lot of effort into organizing this action. But the night before, we had a briefing. They tried to give us like the basic information that we needed to participate. They gave us amazing legal training, and then they just told us, okay, you have to be on this place at this time. So around 11 a.m. we assembled at this small parking lot near Schipol, and then around 12, I think we just kind of went there, and we were all wearing these white jumpsuits that you've probably seen.
And how did you get in?
Yeah, there were already people from Greenpeace inside of like on the other side of the fence. We went to the eastern part of Schiphol, and that's where all the private jets are stationed. I had to run inside it as fast as possible towards the private jets, and then there were already people already sitting there in the lock-on tubes, the metal tubes around your arms, so you can like lock onto other people.
Oh, I see. So you're all kind of locked together.
Not everyone, just a handful of people. The rest of us, we just kind of sat behind them or in front.
Okay, and so a handful of people kind of, and also lock themselves to the planes or something. Or what are they doing there then?
Well, they weren't locked to the planes because if we damaged them, we would be in a lot of legal trouble.
Yeah, that's true.
They locked themselves just to each other, basically just like around the plane. So the plane still couldn't take off, but the plane wouldn't be damaged in any way.
Well, I thought it was an amazing stunt. What interests us, obviously we're looking at the relationship between inequality and climate, and yeah, this connection, if you like, between the super rich and and their lifestyles and planetary breakdown. Do you think that's something that's more and more an issue for young people? Do you see the connection between those two things more, or do you think it's always been a bit like that?
Well, I think especially with young people right now, it's very easy to see the links between the climate crisis and inequality because I mean we're bombarded with the climate crisis every day on the news, but also the Netherlands is facing a huge housing crisis for students. A lot of people going into serious debt to finance their life and their studies. Um, while we do know that there are a lot of rich people in this country. Um, so a lot of people are not only fed up with the climate crisis, they're also fed up with the inequality. And if you lay links to that, which for some people is very easy, then it's very good to come into action.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right. It's true, very true here in the UK as well. I think people are really making that connection between the billionaire class and
Mm-hmm.
people's hardships every day and the climate crisis. I think it's great to see that all coming together. Thank you for doing what you're doing, and thank you to all your comrades and friends and campaigners. Yeah, brilliant work.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Oh, I love that interview. I mean, what a nail biter! What an exciting, risk-taking, and quite brave as well. I'm just not
I
sure I'll ever
know
be
this.
that brave.
Well, maybe you've lost that opportunity now that you're no longer young, Max, because it's like just like that energy and excitement but also, urgency, I think, for young people today. It was a great story and there's just so much mobilization happening around the world. And in Sharm el-Sheikh, I mean, just beautiful images coming out from youth activists, especially from Africa. Just did you see the women wearing blue with the COP27 mobilization? It's just been beautiful to watch. So I mean, definitely feeling depressed by the outcomes, but also a lot of hope in the youth, especially around really just pushing for action on climate.
Yeah, action and also the kind of the uncompromising nature and the radicalism. It's not just the
Mm.
fact that young people are mobilised; it's the fact that they're absolutely fearlessly telling it how it is. And the thing about climate is there's no half measures unless we do the right thing. The planet is screwed. You see the thing in the Guardian where the head of the Jeff Bezos fund said it's not the responsibility of billionaires to fund climate finance; it's the responsibility of governments. And I just wanted to be in the audience saying, well, maybe it's the responsibility of Jeff Bezos to pay his taxes in the first place, and then the government would have more money. But
I
yeah, I
mean, I
think
think you should start a response.
yeah, I think me v Jeff. Anyway, that was great. Great episode. Great to get that live kind of feedback from the COP. And yeah, I mean, we just keep fighting for climate justice and keep trying to make that link to inequality.
That was a great episode, and I'm looking forward to sharing with our audience our upcoming episodes, which are very closely related, looking at the historical responsibility of the global north, the damage that they have caused, and the reparations that they owe to the global south. And so we've got a two-part special coming up on reparations, and we start with the Caribbean, move to Africa. It's super exciting, so do look out for that.
Yeah, looking forward to that one. Brilliant. Thanks, everyone. Do subscribe, tell all your friends, and look forward to talking to you again on Equals.
Bye.